the problem, if you want to call it that we have now is a completely different problem than what we had then. I mean, what we have now is that since then, pretty much, we haven't built enough properties to keep up with the demand in population, to keep up with all the people that are moving here. We have an inventory issue. Do you agree with that?
Hey y'all, Katie here with Team Evo AZ at eXp Realty. We are so excited for season 4 of R.E.A.L with Matt and Katie, and we have so much juicy real estate goodness lined up for you for this season. Thank you so much for following us and for listening to our show. Remember, we are based in the Phoenix, Arizona area, so if you're interested in buying a home, selling a home, or you just have general real estate questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are a valley-wide team. Our handle is at Team Evo AZ on all of your favorite social media platforms. Enjoy the show.
Hey, everybody, it's Katie and
Matt.
Whoa, we're not in the same frame today. How's that? We are that real estate married couple talking a lot about real estate and a little bit about life based in the Phoenix area. And this is our podcast, R.E.A.L with Matt and Katie. Today, we're going to talk about the market. Whoa, big surprise. I've been getting this question a lot when I'm in listing appointments or when I'm having conversations on social media or with our past clientele. And maybe it's not so much a question, maybe it's more so a fear. They have this fear that what's going on in the market, what has been going on here in the Phoenix area for the last couple of years resembles what happened, 10 plus years ago when the sky kind of fell. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about that, Matt. Tell me what the differences are.
Well, I think one of the biggest things is kind of validating their concerns, but asking them what similarities are you seeing? Because I think
the rising prices.
And that's it. And where I was going with that was, I think if you're looking to be fearful on anything, you can always find ingredients to kind of justify that. But I think, and it's ultimately our job to deliver information as the professionals, but to kind of say, hey, you're really picking kind of like these fatalistic indicators that really don't indicate much. Yeah, prices are climbing, but that's one of the 10,000 things that contributed to the crash or what we saw with the crash. And it's just not the case at all. It's a totally different animal. Now, obviously we don't have crystal balls, so we don't know, what's really going to happen in the next 2 years. But what we can do is look at the ingredients and look at them right now, look at them real time and say, this is nothing like it. It's not even in the same ballpark. It's not even the same sport. But I'm sure, you've got some stats and some good stuff to go into on that. But it's definitely something people shouldn't be fearful of, to the extent of 2008. And most of these people that are even saying, like, I remember 2008, do you really remember 2008? Were you a home buyer? Were you a home seller? Were you? And some people were, but most people weren't, especially millennials. They saw their parents going through it and they really didn't understand the intricacies of what was going on.
Right, exactly. And it's the problem, if you want to call it that we have now is a completely different problem than what we had then. I mean, what we have now is that since then, pretty much, we haven't built enough properties to keep up with the demand in population, to keep up with all the people that are moving here. We have an inventory issue. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you really look at 2008, 2006, when it really started for the Valley, it was the opposite. It's because the people that were buying homes and the homes that were being purchased were not being lived in.
Correct.
They were being at secondary, third homes, mostly from California investors to buy and rent. It's a total opposite right now. People are actually moving here for good paying jobs and living here. And they don't have a place to live. So that's a huge, huge difference.
Huge difference. And it was a lending, really, it was a big lending problem back then. So if you could fog a mirror, you just told your lender how much you made, right? Remember that? Oh, yeah. Stated income loans. Remember those? You just tell them how much you made and you bought 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 properties. couldn't get a renter in them. So what did you do? You just let them go, right? At some point, you just stop the bleeding, you let them go. So then we started to see foreclosures, short sales, and then our free fall started happening. Very, very different right now. I mean, what is it? 50% of the Valley has over 50% of equity in their home. We're not going to see, and we haven't seen foreclosures like that anytime soon. Can you speak to that? Do you agree to that or agree with that?
Oh yeah, well, like, because there's not going to be any panic selling. You know, if you really look at 2006, we appreciated like almost 50%, almost 100% in 1 year. Okay, so that's why everyone jumped on that bandwagon. And all of a sudden, when you have a lot of these people that jumped on the bandwagon, they jumped on the last 2 to 3 months when the thing was skyrocketing.
Right.
Those last 2 to 3 months really only represented probably 10 to 15% of equity, which wasn't even really real equity at that time because it was so short-lived.
It was so blown up. Yeah.
The second there was a slight adjustment of 20%, now they're all of a sudden 5% underwater. So the majority of people that did leverage, the majority of people that were just normal everyday folks, and that was the problem. You know, investors got in at the right time. But when you're just a regular citizen that's, you know, that has a fixed income that is now saying, I want to be an investor, and you're mortgaging your house and taking out home equities and or doing this other stuff, or not even having to because of the loan programs that were available, you were able to do this, do a neg am loan. Those people, the ones that really kind of were the last ones to buy. And they're the ones that got hit the most. And they're the ones that, you know, ultimately said, I'm walking away from this. Mm-hmm. You know, I've got my primary. You can't take that from me. Mm-hmm. I don't care. A lot of investors, same thing. But then Uncle Sam stepped in and they kind of were like, hey, you know what? We got a solution for you, you know? And of course, if you're going to start paying people to get foreclosed on or to short sale their homes, what do you think people are going to do? They're going to take the path of least resistance. It's just human nature. And none of that exists right now. You know what I mean? It's just not there. So if all of a sudden, let's just say something really happened on a world level, this whole Ukraine thing turned into a China thing, and things really hit home, we'll say, as far as economics go. And we saw things go flat. We saw things drop 20%. People still have 30% equity and it's their home. It's not their secondary. They're not going anywhere.
Right.
So, and then you ask yourself, well, how long is this? How, you know, I mean, what, and this is, you know, really looking to the worst case scenario. Bottom line is now we look at exactly what's happening with Ukraine. Look at what happens with rates. You know, all of a sudden you had the Fed speaking about how we're going to approach inflation and all this stuff. And we had a natural occurrence happen within the market before the Fed even spoke, and our rates actually settled down. They went from just above 4 in the, you know, I would say, was it about 4.25 down to 4s and high 3s. So there's so many ingredients to this. And I think at the end of the day, don't be distracted. If you're really serious about buying a home, to call it a home, do that. Do that. Rely on your professional to ask these concerns and say, this is really my concern. And you know, we'll be able to give you data, at least to approach this logically and not emotionally.
It's important to get the facts. It's important to understand the details, because where we have an inventory issue now, back then was a lending issue. Lenders have totally cleaned up their act as far as that's concerned. I mean, you cannot, you got to do a lot more than fog a mirror. You got to basically give your firstborn kid to get a mortgage these days. You know what I mean? And so they're really qualifying people and making sure that they've got the things in place, the reserves in place. They've got the income that can handle these types of purchases. And I think that makes a really huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it just protects everyone around. You know what I mean? You know that your neighbor isn't someone that's leveraging and you know what I mean? And if the sky or anything happens, they're going to be ditching and you're going to have an empty foreclosure next door. It's not the case. And if you really look at it, like most of the people that are qualifying nowadays, they're putting large amounts of money down. People are very prepared for this. It's not a lot of people are putting minimal amounts down. And even if they are, they're financially sound. The bank has secured this and they understand that they got reserves in a worst case scenario. And once again, this isn't secondary homes. This is your primary residence. We all know that personally as humans, if all of a sudden something happens in our life, there are many things that we are going to eliminate and stop paying before we would stop paying on our shelter.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing to think about.
Giant. So armless, for those of you who don't know, Arizona Regional MLS, that's our MLS system. They do some reporting each month. And I've got the armless report. I just wanted to, and I'm going to kind of read it to you guys here for those of you that are just listening to this and not watching the video. But armless reported, this came out, of course, they're a month behind. When it comes out in February, it's really reporting on, January's numbers and kind of what was going on back then. But I thought that this was really interesting. And Tom Ruff, his commentary was about why supply is so low here in the Phoenix area. And the first and foremost, and I totally agree with this, and in fact, see it quite a bit with our clientele, just our personally, the people who come through our doors. So I believe baby boomers are aging in place. It is reported boomers own 42% to 44% of all homes in the USA. And with Maricopa County being an attractive retirement destination, these numbers may be higher. So that's giant right there. It's an attractive, number two is Maricopa County is an attractive winter haven for those Northerners, those baby boomers, owning a second non-primary residence in our state. These are homes that are owned by part-time residents and again, most likely owned by baby boomers. So that's what Armless is saying about some of our inventory here that's being held on to. And it's probably been held on to for quite a bit of time by these baby boomers, right? They've probably been doing this for a little while. They've probably been coming to the area, repeatedly. Number three is another evolving trend, which I'm seeing this a lot in our clientele, is Airbnb properties. Airbnb was founded in 2008, turning shelter into vacation rentals. While we don't know the number of Airbnbs in Maricopa County, a recent Phoenix New Times article estimates more than 5,000 properties out of Scottsdale's 90,000 households. Nearly 6% are now listed as vacation rentals for some part of the year. If they are making money, they are not selling. We are now seeing reports of investment firms that are taking aim at this market. So we've really got two situations here, Matt, right? I mean, we've got the people who are in the primary residences, like we just talked about, and then the other percentage, they're making money on these properties. Yeah. So I think that's an important piece of it also.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see how Airbnb does now that we are emerging from like the cloak of COVID. You think about why Airbnb popped up so much is because you don't have to walk through a lobby. You don't have to deal with strangers. You literally go to a house and you're there with your family and you are isolated. You are social distancing. But what that does is it really does take away from one of the things a lot of people really like to celebrate before COVID, and that's pool areas, common areas, local restaurants that you can walk to right from your room, all these things. And I just have a feeling, even when you look around at especially Phoenix and a lot of the areas all over, big hotels are coming in. Hotels are being remodeled. And I do have a feeling that there is going to be a shift. And then you're also starting to hear a lot of people are really sounding off on these Airbnbs as far as, I don't want this as my next door neighbor.
Right.
It's getting annoying. I'm sick of this happening. So I do think we're going to see a little shift in that over the next few years.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then here's the other piece, and this is something that we've been talking about on the podcast for quite some time, and that's institutional buyers backed by hedge funds. They became a thing in early 2011, and their purchases are continuing today with a strategy to procure, package, and rent. So with our inventory levels being so low, we have people out there that need to rent. We have people out there that don't have houses that are moving here to this area, and they are scooping up these properties. So again, these properties are making money for these homeowners. We have seen only a few instances of an institution purchase reverting to a traditional buyer. In the rare instance where this does occur, the institution most likely mistakenly purchased outside their model. So if they're feeding it to us, then that was a mistake on their part. Institutional buyers are aggressively making cash offers on all single-family homes, minimum 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage homes built in 1980 or newer without a pool or spa. Their strategy is to buy, hold, and rent. Over the past year, they accounted for 10% of all properties purchased in Maricopa County in the $250,000 to $500,000 price range. By our estimation, institutional buyers currently hold 27,000 to 30,000 properties in Maricopa County, and that number is rising monthly. The reason for the disparity in numbers lies in our ability to identify and count single-family homes built specifically to rent. Each month, as I review the institutional buyers, I have an uneasy feeling I'm underestimating their footprint. Thoughts on that?
It's true, but once again, it is healthy because they are rentals,
right? And I can't tell you how many renters come through our doors. We need properties to rent also. I think it's harder to rent at this point in time in the Phoenix area than it is to purchase a property.
I do. And I think that, absolutely. And they know this. And so it's a catch-22. People yell and say, oh, this is terrible. But at the same time, it's very much needed.
Totally agree. Almost getting down to the bottom here. Number 5, foreclosures. Oh, the topic everybody always wants to talk about. A huge contributor of supply at the onset of the prior decade. So way back when, foreclosures were giant for the supply for us, for our inventory. It's nearly non-existent today. There were only 256 residential foreclosures in 2021. How many millions of properties do we have here, you think?
Over 1.5, I'd say.
Oh, yeah, I would say. And only 256, so like not even a sprinkle in the bucket, pretty much, foreclosed in 2021. While we'll most likely see numbers a little higher in 2022, their expected contribution to supply will remain insignificant. So what's happening with these onesie, twosies, tiny amounts of people that are going into foreclosure? I guess we would never really know. Maybe it's a death in the family or something tragic that perhaps happened.
I think you said it, the fact that 256 representative of a million, it's this much. These are like just anomalies. These are things that, really don't mark anything for the masses. And that's why it's only 256. I remember in 2008, when I started a company down at the court steps, 256 properties a day I'd have to review at night. At least. Yeah. Someone we're going into foreclosure every day. So it's that's crazy, but that's great. That right there says everything. Everything about where we're at right now. If all of a sudden we were to even see a slight trend, that number pick up 100%, 200%, which is still a fraction, it would say something, but that's where this number's been now for a bit.
And, I'm so curious, and I know we'll never know, but I'm so curious of the situations of that 256, because it doesn't happen very often, but over the last couple of years, I have had a few instances come across my desk, or just people that I've known that have known people that have gone into foreclosure with a bunch of equity in their property.
Yeah, and it's usually like sheriff sales, and it's going to be things like that are really forced on by I bet you most of them, that's what it is. There's, like you said, a death, unforeseen circumstance. It wasn't any of the ingredients that people went into foreclosure before this. This isn't, oh yeah, I can't afford my house and I bought it before. No, this is something way beyond that. Those 256 properties represent guaranteed.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Not something that I really consider when I'm looking at market conditions, to be honest. It's just too small.
Yeah.
Number 6, new home sales were down 15.7% in January, year over year in Maricopa County, as builders have trouble moving their product from finished to closed. So they can start it, but moving it from finished to close has been super difficult for builders. We're feeling it with some of our clientele. We've got builder contracts that have been out there for a year or more, and these builds should have been completed 8 months ago. But what are we going to do? There, again, supply chain issues. There are labor issues, things like that are getting in the way of this. So it's getting in the way of our inventory increasing also.
Totally. And that number 15% down it doesn't really represent anything, because it doesn't tell us about the demand. It just means that they can't close on them. And if you really look at what we've seen over the last years, they've just throttled back. They don't even offer. At this point, they're like, hey, we're not even offering new properties until we finish this phase, until we know exactly what's going on. So I'm sure if you were to kind of, measure those metrics at the front end to say, hey, how many were actually available? How many were offered for sale a year ago or the prior year compared to now? That would justify that 15% and say, yeah, this isn't, it's not really down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And, that's not to poo-poo getting a new build or to look
No.
into purchasing a new build by any means. We do guide our clients quite a bit in the new build world. We do have a list of those new builds that are achieving better timeframes than others, I guess you could say. So it's definitely wise. You can walk into a new build community all by yourself, do it all on your own. It doesn't benefit you though. It doesn't get you any money off the property. It doesn't get you any better deal. In fact, it's probably a worse deal coming in unrepresented. So make sure that you're talking to your real estate professional. You are going into these new build communities represented. So that way you have not only this knowledge behind you, but you can also figure out the details of each builder community, see who's got the better time frames, see who has the better incentives, because they actually do. Some builders do still have incentives, Matt. I swear they do.
Yeah. And, and one of the things too, like a lot of people think about, they're like, hey, yeah, new builds are great. I can buy now when I move and I have equity and all that. But one of the things that I would like prep people to kind of to think about is when you start entering into these type of atmospheres where you do have this unknown close date that could be anywhere from 10 months to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
You're not able to lock your rate until, what is it, 60 or 90 days before when they get to a certain point
Depending, yeah.
So there's a lot in the air. You could be buying this home and saying, hey, yeah, I'm making 30 grand of equity. But if all of a sudden, we fast forward 18 months and rates are up, or at the point in time when you do have to now lock that rate, it might not be as favorable, especially if it's your long-term home. You might have actually, that 30 grand looks good at close of escrow, but when you start looking at the cost to refi, the cost that you're paying in interest and all that, it's not that sparkly. So it's just something to kind of consider. If you're thinking like, hey, this is just the best route and it makes sense from a financial stance, I'd say, once again, talk to a professional and have them weigh out all the ingredients on that approach.
Absolutely agree. All right, guys. So that is Matt and Katie's whole rundown about why right now is what's going on is different than what happened back then. Again, it's a question that I get a lot. I've been having the conversation a lot. So I thought we thought we would share it with you. If you are interested in being a guest on the show, please follow us. Our handle is at Team EvoAZ, and we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Give us a little message. Let us know why you think that you'd like to be on the show and what you have to share. Also, while you're at it, give us a like, if you would, please. And right now, while you're listening to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe, download, and rate us, because that will help us get some organic reach and get this real information into the hands of real people that need to hear it. All right, Matt, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.